What's up, and welcome back to another side-by-side benchmarking between the MSI Stealth 14 and the Zephyrus G14. Now, we are going to do a lot more than just benchmarking today. We're going to compare features. We're going to talk about display, weight, speakers, webcam. We're going to test basically the CPU and the GPU in benchmarking. In utilities as well as actual gameplay. And that some of those games are going to be more CPU bound and some are going to be GPU bound. Now, today's benchmarks are going to be at full HD plus 1920 by 1200p resolution, because that is the resolution of the MSI Stealth 14, and it's easier to bring that resolution down on the G14 to match the Stealth 14 just for the sake of apples to apples benchmark comparison. Now, in the past, I have tested both the Stealth 14 and the Zephyrus G14 already, and I'm in general very impressed with both of these laptops. That said, there's quite a few key feature differences between these two, even though they're priced the same. Sometimes they're going to be on sale, so the prices are going to vary a little bit, but overall, the value proposition is very similar because you have the same key GPU for the gaming performance, the RTX 4060, and of course you have different CPUs in these two platforms, which is probably the biggest spec difference, besides maybe the display resolution as well. So without further ado, let's get into our overview of all the different specs between these two. Mahmoud, what's up? Welcome to the stream. I just ordered a 4090 G14. It's arriving Friday. Congrats, man. Now, that is another one of the key spec differences, is that the Zephyrus G14 can go all the way up to the RTX 4090. And if you're curious where to buy it, because it might be a little hard to find it, there are actually links in the description to buy the RTX 4080 and 4090 versions of the G14 from Best Buy. And I believe the 4090 version currently is in stock at Best Buy. And we're going to talk about that as well today. We've got some basic stats as well, some benchmarks from the 4090 version to give you an idea of how it's going to perform compared to the 4060 version. So without further ado, let's get into our key feature specs, and let's do a quick shopping overview. Like, where can you find these if you do decide you need to you want to buy them? Let me make sure that this is good to go. Looks like we need to change this to right here. Okay. So this right here is my RTX 4000 series, or basically all of the new laptops in 2023, plus the laptops that are worth buying that are on sale for RTX 3000 series, all in one place. You can filter this and search this both by price point. So if you're looking for a specific price point of a laptop, or a specific processor or GPU configuration. So you want an RTX 4090 laptop, or you want a Radeon laptop, whatever, you can search those in the key model terms here. You can find anything that you're looking for. So today we're looking for the G14. So I'm just going to type in G14, press enter. And here are all the different versions of the G14 currently available for sale. So you can get a RTX 4050 version of this for $1429. And all of these come with the same QHD 500 nits display. So that's nice to see. The only difference is that the higher end versions of the G14 do have a mini LED option, and that bumps the nits brightness from 500 up to 600, and a much higher contrast ratio as well. It comes with mini LED, though mini LED also has some blooming factor. If you do go with the mini LED display, you will not be able to get the anime matrix on it. The anime matrix being this animated logo thing that you can get on the back of the Zephyrus G14. The base model that I have tested today at $1,600 does not come with the anime matrix or the mini LED. So, and if you do, so the nice thing about not getting the anime matrix or the mini LED is that it's actually a little bit thinner. Like the actual display width on the unit itself, right here, like this part right here is actually a little thinner, because when they add the mini LED or anime matrix in the back, it does require it to be a little bit thicker. Adds, I don't know, 1/10 of an inch or so, maybe 2/10 of an inch of thickness to the laptop, and a little bit of extra weight as well. So that's kind of why if you'll notice that the 4090 version is 3.8 pounds, basically 3.79 pounds, where the 4060 version 3.64 pounds. So you get another 10, 0.13 pounds if you add the anime matrix or mini LED display to the back of that thing. That's it. I think it'd probably be worth it if you are into the animated matrix lid or whatever. So these are the 4 different options you have. Let me kind of zoom in here. So if I zoom in, you can kind of see the different price points for the G14. So at $14.29, $40.50, $40.60, $15.99, $40.70, $18.49. I don't think the $40.60 to $40.70 upgrade is probably worth the $250. Maybe it's probably only like an 8 to 10% performance gain, going from the 4060 to 4070. Pretty small jump overall. The 4080 though is a huge jump in performance. It's gonna be like a 50% performance gain going up to the 4080 version, and the 4090 version at $32.99 is gonna have, I believe it should have the mini LED display. Now, if we pop over to their technical specs here, does it? Yeah, so it says mini LED with the 4090 version. So if you go with the 4090, you do get the mini LED option. Like I said, and that's going to increase your contrast ratio as well as your overall brightness for the display. So yeah, if I was personally buying this, because I would probably buy the highest end 4090 version for that mini LED as well as the additional performance per pound. But and the biggest difference as well between the 4050, 4060, 4070 and the 4080, 4090 is the VRAM. The VRAM is much more limited on the 4070 and below because you only have 8 gigs of VRAM, and you get a lot more VRAM on the 4080 and 4090 versions, which is going to prevent 1% low stuttering just in general. So if you can swing the 4080 or 4090 versions, I do recommend it if possible. But if you're on a budget, you can still do a lot of great gaming. In the vast majority of games, just there are certain titles that are going to be very VRAM limited and cause stuttering. So I just want to make sure everyone knows that going into one of these purchases, that you're going to have to fiddle with settings and potentially down resolution or texture settings in certain titles. And we're going to deal with that today when we do our benchmarking. So what about the Stealth 14? Where can you buy it? So by the way, this is where you can buy it. There is a Best Buy link in the description down below. Comes with 32 gigs of RAM. And you've got the RTX 4090, and it should have a mini LED display here as well. So like I said, this is the one I would probably buy if I was buying the G14, because it has basically the extra bells and whistles. And then if we're talking about the Stealth 14, the Stealth 14 has 3 primary configurations, and you can get a QHD 240 Hertz panel. And it is, of course, a 14-inch display. The one we're testing today, though, comes with a 165 Hertz Full HD Plus panel. And in many ways, at 14 inches, I think a Full HD Plus panel is enough resolution, and it helps make running games easier at native resolution if you can run it in Full HD Plus. Lower resolution equals more FPS, less VRAM limitations. And so in some ways, I feel like going with a 4060 with 8 gigs of VRAM with a Full HD Plus panel makes more sense for a lot of people. Now, you only have one M.2 slot in the Stealth 14. You do have Windows Hello. We're going to go over all these features as well. Important to note that you have Thunderbolt 4, right, on the Stealth 14. Given the fact that the Zephyrus G14 is a Ryzen-based CPU, it means that you're not going to have Thunderbolt 4 support, where you do have that on the Stealth 14. So very, very important thing to note. And the other big thing to note about the Stealth 14 is that you cannot go to the RTX 4080 or 4090 at all. They've just limited it to the 4050, 4060, and 4070. And the primary reason for this is because the 4080 and 4090 versions of the GPU require a different motherboard setup, and it also requires a bit of a thermal heat sink redesign. So it requires extra work to implement a 4080 or 4090 version. Asus went to that extra work to implement that in the G14, and MSI did not in the Stealth 14. So that's very important to keep in mind. Now, so if you're on a budget anyway, then in many ways, the Stealth 14 with the lower resolution panel can be very attractive with a 4060. Again, especially if you're planning on using that Thunderbolt 4 port. Okay, so where can you buy the Stealth 14? Again, you can get this from Best Buy. This is actually currently on sale for $14.99, so it currently costs $100 less than the G14. It looks like it's saying it was $16.99, but I thought it was originally retail priced at $15.99. Now that's making me question that. But basically, this is the same exact unit that I have with me today. The other big thing about the Stealth 14 is that it comes with a bigger SSD out of the box. You get 1 terabyte SSD versus 512 gig SSD on the G14. So I have a handy dandy presentation for you guys. Let me go ahead and pull that up. This should be good to go now. Cool, that looks good. All right, so is it presentation 2? There we go. All right. So Asus Zephyrus G14, breaking it down in one like quick segment. You've got the Ryzen 9 7945 HS, or you could get, I guess, the 77, the Ryzen, it's like 7735 HS, which is last generation basically. If you want to get the latest gen tech with Zen 4 architecture with 4 nanometer process, which can lead potentially to better battery life, you need to get the new processor chip, which is the 7940HS, which is an 8-core, 16-thread part. RTX 4060 125 watt with 8 gigs of VRAM, upgradable up to an RTX 4090, and it costs $32.99 for that 4090 version. And again, I do recommend it if you can get it. It gets about a little over 18,000 in Timespy GPU, which is about an 80% performance gain over the RTX 4060 in the unit we're testing today. So it is a massive jump in performance, but also a massive increase to price. So it's understandable if you can't do that. Now, 16 gigs of DDR5, 4800 RAM. Now, this is not the max RAM speed for the processor, which can go up to 5600. We have a smaller 512 gig SSD, vapor chamber cooling in both of the laptops, a QHD 165 Hz, 500 nit display, 16 by 10 with no ghosting. It's a fast response rate, excellent for esports games. 3.64 pounds of weight, 0.73 inches thin, and there's an optional anime matrix or mini LED display to keep in mind. You can only get one or the other. You cannot have both in the same unit because the mini LEDs basically either face backwards for the anime matrix display or forwards into the display itself. You have Windows Hello on both laptops with, of course, a webcam and I believe fairly good speakers. We'll be testing the speakers side by side today, one after another, so you can get a good idea of how they sound like. Single zone RGB keyboard. Well, the Stealth 14 has a multi per key RGB. The keyboards on both of these laptops have great feel and the trackpad works great, and they're about the same size for the trackpad. The Zephyrus G14 lacking the Thunderbolt 4, but has a little bit better ports overall with a micro SD card slot and 2 USB-As on it versus only 1 USB-A on the Stealth 14. So going to the Stealth 14, you've got the i7 13620H with 6P cores, 4 E cores, which is 10 core, 16 thread overall. There's this processor is going to be great for gaming, great for multi-core performance for the laptop size, but it's not going to be quite as powerful as the Ryzen chip in terms of multi-core rendering, as we'll see here when we do Cinebench R23. Now, the RTX 4060 is a 90 watt rated, vapor chamber cooling, of course, on both. 16 gigs DDR5, 4000. So we're not maxing the RAM at 5200. Full HD plus display, but you can get QHD 240 Hz display options with up to RTX 4070 in the Stealth 14. We rated this, I believe, to be around 400 nits brightness in my display test. So it's not quite as bright as the G14, but it's not a bad display, and it has excellent color gamut as well. Both of the displays have very good color gamut. Though I think the G14 has a bit higher color gamut. Now, the lower resolution makes it easier to not run out of VRAM and easier to run games overall. Now, you can always down res on the G14 as well if you need to lower the resolution, and it doesn't look terrible, but it's not quite as crisp as native resolution. And of course, QHD resolution in general is going to be more crisp than full HD. But for QHD gaming in general, I recommend a 4080 or 4090 GPU because of the increased VRAM, allowing you to not have 1% low stuttering from when you run out of that VRAM. which is going to happen more often at higher resolutions. So 3.75 pounds, 0.75 inches thick, which is just a little bit thicker than the G14 at 0.73. And I think both of these systems have good speakers. I'm not sure which one's better. We'll have to test it side by side, and I'll let you know what I think, and you can decide for yourself as well. Per key RGB keyboard that works really well with a large touchpad, has Thunderbolt 4 support, as I mentioned, but less ports than the G14. So there's a lot of trade-offs between these two, but the key differences, for sure, between the two units that we're testing today is the resolution difference and the display quality difference, as well as the fact that it's a Ryzen chip versus an Intel chip, and of course the fact that the G14 in theory goes to a higher wattage limit, which should in theory give the G14 an advantage in performance. So without further ado, let me check chat and see where we're at, see how we're doing. USB 4 is the same as Thunderbolt 4. They have the same specifications, but they are not the same. They are, like, for example, certain Thunderbolt 4 peripherals will not work with USB 4 because they're not certified Thunderbolt 4. Maybe you can hack it with software, but theoretically they have the same throughput and everything, but it's not the exact same levels of support, because if you have a Thunderbolt 4 eGPU, it probably won't work with USB 4 to the best of my knowledge. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but that's the best of my knowledge. Now, Joe Schmo says, really want a 4090 versus 4080 comparison for the G14. A few examples I think might be closer than we think. Well, for sure, CPU-bound games are going to have a very small gap between a 4080 and a 4090, but more GPU-bound games, I'm guessing around a 15% performance difference. And I wanted to show you this as well. Let me pop over to here and just go to here. All right, and in this sheet we do have some benchmarks here. So with the 4060 version that we tested, we got 10,528. And with the 4090 version that someone else tested, got 18,515. So 8,000 more points with the RTX 4090. And that was just a Reddit thread that was giving the Timespy impressions. So you can go in there and you can, this is, right now Reddit is doing a protest against third-party app being shut down, so you can't actually see this right now, but in a couple days you'll be able to see this benchmark result again. But basically around 18,500 for the RTX 4090 variant or version of the G14. So it's not as high and not as high a performance as a full 175 watt RTX 4090, which can get closer to 21 to 22,000, maybe even 23,000 if it's got an overclock. And but still 18,500. And then the fact that you don't have to worry about your VRAM basically means that the 4090 version of the G14 can play any game on ultra settings in QHD resolution and have no problems at all. It's just going to play everything smoothly at current, all the current games at basically max settings without issue, to the best of my knowledge. So it's definitely an upgrade that I think would be worth it, because the 4060 version is not going to be that way. Some games are going to require quite a bit of settings fiddlings to get everything to work well. Whereas with the Stealth 14, because the Stealth 14 has a lower resolution, you can pretty much run everything on ultra settings out of the box at that native resolution, full HD plus resolution, without having to worry about it, because it scales better with the resolution. So there might be a few games where you're still going to have to turn some settings down. Even at full HD, might run into some VRAM limitations, but it's a lot more rare. Okay, so without further ado, I believe we are ready to move into the next phase of the review today. I think we're going to test the speakers first. All right. Leon Sanderson, really enjoyed your videos. Very helpful. Thanks so much, Leon. Are you going to test out the ROG Ally? I have got one being delivered today. And yes, I do plan on streaming the unboxing of that probably tomorrow. And we're going to test it all out. And then I'll do probably another live stream comparing it to the Steam Deck directly in a one-on-one head-to-head comparison. I think it's going to be really, really great. Okay. Sweet. let's go ahead and do our speaker comparison side by side. All right, so we're going to change angles. We've got our decibel meter. All right, and we're going to do that. Cool. I should probably turn these down a little bit in brightness so they don't blow out the camera. All right, and we're going to change this to be just like that. All right, beautiful. Okay, so first up, we have Peter Spacey Roar. We're just going to set this decibel meter right in front of the laptops today, and we'll see what we get. So first, we're going to do a relative decibel test. Let's see what our room audio decibels are. So 43.3 for our basic baseline. Let's move into Peter Spacey Roar. So it was getting right around 83 to 84 decibels in terms of total volume, which is pretty good. And the bass is certainly noticeable. Let me listen to it one more time. But I feel like the bass is a little bit muddled. It's not super clear, and it certainly could be improved or could be a little bit better. So now we're going to go ahead and move into the same test over on the G14 and see what it sounds like. Let's rotate this to the right side here. All right, and here we go. Well, I would say the bass is a little bit less muddled, and we also got a little bit higher on the decibel meter, going up to about 85. So that's I guess a win for the G14. Next, we're moving into Faded Aeon by Half-Life. I'll go ahead and bring it back to the beginning here. I gotta say, the Stealth 14 handled that one really well. Sounds very good, I think. All right, let's try the G14. Faded Aeon Half-Life. Here we go. That is pretty close between the two, but I think let me try the Stealth again. G14 again. Yeah, I'd say the Stealth has a little bit more of a warmer tone to it, a little more full audio experience for that kind of mid and high tones that we were listening to there. I would say like the G14 had better bass, then the Stealth 14 had much better mids and highs to me. All right, let's do Deuce Williams. This is very like verbal vocals. Let's see what this sounds like. Stealth 14. Okay, and we're gonna do the next one for the G14. Okay, let me put it back here. Okay, so the way I would describe the audio is the G14. I think the G14 has a little bit better bass to it. But when it comes to mids and highs, I give the advantage to the Stealth 14, and they both have about the same total audio volume between the two, both reaching about 83, 84 decibels. But I think the G14 was just a hair louder overall. I think the G14 just sounded a little bit tinnier, I guess, for those mids and highs, where the Stealth 14 felt a little bit clearer on the mids and highs. But overall, I do like the speakers on both of these. For compared to most gaming laptops, they're both above average, and a very enjoyable audio experience for the size of the laptop itself. So Lincoln says, nice fresh haircut. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Someone got almost 22,000 on a 4090 G14. Yeah, they redid the VBIOS on it, which is not probably a good idea if you want to have longevity in your G14. So wouldn't recommend it. It's probably just more like a temporary benchmarking thing, and then you're going to go back to your default BIOS for long-term usage. Yeah, because it's just not worth it, worth the risk. Anyway, but yeah, it is possible to get over 20K in the G14, but only in like a burst, you know? Okay, so next up, let's move into going over the keyboard and mouse setup on each of these. I think this will be very helpful for some people that are trying to decide between these ergonomically, which one is better. So, all right. So, first up, let's take a closer look at the Stealth 14 here. So as you can see, the touchpad is fairly large on the Stealth 14, almost the exact same size, honestly, as the G14. They are nearly identical in terms of size. The key feel, though, the key feel is quite a bit different between these two, though. Like the actual keyboard, I would say is, I don't know, like these keys are a little bit bigger, and the font on them are different, and the arrow key layouts are different. You got the page up, page down above the arrow keys over here on the Stealth 14, where on the G14, you know, you've just got the page up, page down. In terms of styling, you know, you've got the per key RGB over here on the Stealth 14, but the thing is, it's not that vibrant or bright of a per key RGB. So it's only going to really be super visible, in my opinion, when the lights are dimmer. You know, some some RGB keyboards are very visible in all lights. Like for example, I've got my Blade 18 right here. Very visible lights, right? Very visible lights. And I've got the Stealth 14, not as noticeable, right? In the same exact lighting, it's just not as noticeable or cool. But if you were to go into dimmer environments, it would become much more noticeable. So, yeah. And in terms of RGB, the Stealth 14 does not have any RGB on it, but the G14 does not have any RGB on it, where the Stealth 14 does have some RGB on the rear. The only RGB on the Stealth on the G14 is, see, it says Stealth right there, and then there is an RGB light over here on the left and right sides. So a little bit of extra styling for the Stealth 14, which I like as an RGB person. But yeah, I'm a big RGB fan, but at the same time, the RGB implementation on either of these devices isn't that strong. Neither of them really look like gaming laptops, which is probably going to be a big positive for some people and not so great for others. It's going to depend on the individual person. But I think either of these laptops could look right at home in a business meeting or in a college scenario. And no one would know that they are officially gaming laptops as long as you are not, as long as you just set the RGB color to white, basically. And then everyone's going to be like, cool. Or just turn the RGB off unless it's a dark environment, and then when you turn it on, turn it to white if you want to hide that it's a gaming laptop. So overall, the key layout itself is functional for the G14 and the Stealth 14. Neither of them are massively superior to the other. I think they're about the same. You've got a little bit extra function buttons here on the G14 with the volume up, down, mic mute, and the ROG Armory crate launch button there, the M4 button. And that's nice, but it's really, it's such a minor thing, right? So I'm turning on the RGB backlight now, and you can see that it's shifting between the different colors here, and it's all a single zone RGB. Let's go ahead and turn the lights off so you can see what the RGB looks like on both of these in dimmer environments. So that's what the G14 looks like. And let me go ahead and switch it to all white. This is how I would use the G14. I would just keep it on all white all the time because I think it looks better. And I should probably turn off my RGB lights back here in the back of my room so it just kind of gets more just the straight RGB of the keyboard itself. So that's a breathing mode, strobing mode, color cycle, and that's all the RGB on the G14. Over here on the Stealth 14, you can see the RGB so much better now that I have dimmed the lights, but it's not going to be as pronounced as this unless you're in a very dark environment. So that's very important to keep in mind. And this will also let us see the rear RGB lights much better. So you got the Stealth, and then of course you've got the lights on the left and the right, and they are pretty minor, not that noticeable. But they're there and they're cool. They are what they are. As far as I know, I don't think you can change them in the software. Let me try adjusting it here in the Stealth 14 software. I can't remember if they let you change it or not. So going into the software of each of these laptops real quick, very, very important. You cannot underestimate how important the control software for each of these laptops are. So basically with MSI, what you have is the MSI Center, and then you have inside of the MSI Center, you have basically these user scenarios. You can set extreme performance, balanced, silent, super battery, and this also lets you use the MUX switch to switch between hybrid mode, which lets you switch on the fly, dedicated GPU mode, which basically doesn't let you switch unless you restart the machine, and integrated graphics mode, which turns off the GPU. So that way you can be sure you get the best battery life possible. So overall, if I was playing games, I would probably be in discrete mode with extreme performance, or maybe MS hybrid graphics mode if I'm needing to unplug the system a lot, like in college or in business, traveling between different environments. But overall, this works well, but it's not quite as advanced of a graphics switching system as the G14. The G14 lets you switch the graphics on the fly, going into complete dedicated GPU mode or integrated mode without needing to restart. So, but sometimes you will have to shut down certain applications in order to do the switch. So yeah, it can still be inconvenient switching between these different modes, but not as inconvenient as needing a full restart. Now, extreme performance mode does allow you to turn on cooler boost. So cooler boost lets you boost your fans to the maximum fan speed. And there's also a hotkey for this, which is just the FN plus up arrow, and that will let you enable cooler boost with a quick key press. And that lets you get the best possible temperatures on your gaming laptop when you're playing games. So very, very useful to be able to turn this on and off on the fly. If you do auto and you're in extreme performance mode, it will just ramp the fans much more often to make sure you stay in good temperature ranges. And I got to say that, as you'll see, I believe later today, that the temperatures on the Stealth 14 are excellent, whereas the G14 can get a little bit spicy sometimes. We're going to see how they all line up in this head-to-head comparison. So jumping over to the G14 now, let's go ahead and pull up the Armory Crate application. This is the application that you use to control the G14. Looks like it's doing an update real quick. Not sure how long it's going to take, but let me go ahead and get some other applications open while this is downloading. We're going to go into Cinebench R23. We're going to do some side-by-side testing with Cinebench R23 next after we do this overview. All right. Interesting. It's taking a while to get these updates done. There it is. Since I just, I unpackaged these from their boxes a couple days ago, I went through a bunch of Windows updates and everything. It's just going to take a little bit to get everything running at full speed because there's a lot of software updates and Windows updates that happened in the month since I did the benchmarks on these. Lord says they really need to move the charger port to the back side instead of the middle. Cable literally blocks the exhaust. Interesting. I don't know how they'd move the charger to the backside on the G14. Maybe on the Stealth 14, but yeah. Okay, so here is the Armory Crate application. Let's go ahead and just go down one. Is that enough to make it viewable? Okay, still too bright. Let's go ahead and just turn some of this on. Maybe this will help the overall exposure of everything. I guess I'm going to turn the screen brightness down a little bit more. I don't know. I guess my exposure on my camera can come down a little bit. I'm not sure. Okay. Well, that's good enough to show you what's going on inside of here. So in Armory Crate, this is the main interface area of the device. You've got your CPU, GPU performance modes here in silent, performance, turbo, and manual. Now, the RTX 4060 in this laptop is set to be a higher wattage than the Stealth 14, but you can adjust the wattage to the GPU by adjusting this dynamic boost downwards or not letting it go all the way up. So right now it's only 5 out of 25 watts. If we're at 5 out of 25, I think that would be a 105 watts to the 4060, and it's not going to go higher than 105 watts if you keep it down. So that's one way to help reduce the temperature if you want. Another thing you could do if you wanted the temperature to be lower on the G14, you could also reduce the target temps. If you wanted to say keep it at 80 or below, it would start throttling the GPU at 80 or below. Now, NVIDIA says it's safe to go up to 87 degrees, but not above that. So that's what usually manufacturers set for the top of the thermal target for GPUs. Now, in manual mode that we'll be testing today, there is a base overclock of 50/100. And I don't know, I guess for today's sake, we could do the same exact overclock on both GPUs for fair comparisonness. The other thing about Armory Crate in manual mode that you need to know is you can set a fan curve so that like right here, when it's at, the fan will be at 100% if it reaches 95 degrees. It will be at 90% at 82 degrees. It'll be at 77% at 76 degrees. You can set this so that the fans will ramp at whatever percentage of fan speed you want based on the temperature of the GPU. Or you can switch to the CPU over here, and there's a separate CPU fan. So that's like the left and right sides, because there's two fans in the bottom of the laptop. And this basically lets you ramp your fans a little bit differently for the CPU focused fan if you want. You don't have to adjust these. Today we're going to be testing on maximum fans for both the G14 and Stealth 14 for the sake of fairness. So, all right. So I think we're ready to go ahead and we're just going to ramp this all the way up. We're going to say yes. You're going to be able to hear the fans now. Soon you should start hearing the fans. They're slowly coming on. Okay, I'm pretty sure that is max fans now. They are set to 5,500 RPMs. And we're getting right around 55.5 decibels. So let's go ahead and we'll set the fans back to turbo mode. And let's check out the Stealth 14's max fan sounds. All right, so here we go. Wait, I'm waiting here for the G14 fans to ramp down. They must have changed the BIOS or something to where they ramp up and down very slowly, because it is taking a while for these fans to go up and down. So, all right. Okay, so here is the Stealth 14, which comes on very fast. The G14 is still making just a little bit of sound. Okay, now the G14 is pretty quiet. Let's go ahead and turn these on. So the Stealth 14 doing 57.5 decibels, being a bit louder than the G14. Pretty interesting. You know, I think it's partially that the Stealth 14 kind of has a little bit more of a whistly acoustic to it, is my guess as well. So in terms of the audio sound. So let's go back to, I'm going to set both of these to max fans mode now. All right, and inside of this, I just want to point out that we're about to do a CPU test, and we have all of our power limits slid up to the max on the G14, which sets the short and long power limits to 80 watts, which is the maximum that it can go. And then eventually, I believe it may even thermal throttle down below that if it cannot maintain a good temperature at these wattage levels, but it's going to try to hit 80 watts. All right, so we have Cinebench R23. Now, let's go ahead and get HWInfo. I want to show you guys HWInfo real quick. If you guys wanted to, you can pause and look at you can pause and look at this. But this is the G14. All right, and then let's switch over to the Stealth 14. I'll rotate this a little bit over here. All right, there we go. So there's the Stealth 14, and so that's just kind of like the core hardware, the CPU, the motherboard and RAM, and then the GPU information on each of the laptops. All right, so let me go ahead and pull up HWInfo now in sensors mode so that we can take a look at our power limits and temperatures across both of these, and then we'll also be able to see the performance quite clearly here in a moment. All right, I'm going to enter the stream into split screen mode. So this is where we're going to focus on both of the laptop displays at the same time. All right. Cool. Just getting this all lined up so we can see everything clearly. And then we're going to need to scoot this over just a hair. Very cool. All right. And let me just rotate this. It's looking good. Okay. Beautiful. Okay, so the Stealth 14 is on the left, the G14 is on the right. MMT says, hey Gizmo, thanks for your stream. Purchased a Stealth 14 on Best Buy, but apparently they have a used open box unit with hardware ban on Warzone. Any advice? Well, my guess is you're probably not going to be able to get that hardware ban reversed unless you talk to Warzone support. Maybe you can get it reversed. Especially if you show a proof of receipt that you bought an open box item, maybe they would consider it. But most likely, they're probably not going to reverse the ban. You probably got to return the Stealth 14, probably. Yes. Okay, here we go. Are you ready? Let's find out which one of these has higher levels of CPU performance. Again, 10 cores, 12 threads on the i7 chip, the Intel chip, and 8 cores, 16 threads for the Ryzen chip. Okay, so the key thing though is that all of the Ryzen chips are high performance cores, whereas on the Intel chip we have 6 performance cores and 4 efficiency cores. So you get 2 more cores, but 4 of them are efficiency cores. So it's pretty interesting. But the most important thing really here is that the Ryzen chip is made with the latest technology from AMD, where the Intel chip is kind of like a refreshed 12th gen Intel almost. You know, so it's not really like as high a performance in my opinion, and it's less likely to have quite as good a battery life either in my opinion. But let's see what we're at. So we got 16,438 versus 17,436. Pretty close. Honestly, closer than I thought we would be. Okay, let's run it again. And while we're running it, let's take a look at our temperatures and performance. So over here on the Stealth, we got 4.3 gigahertz on the P cores, 3.3 on the E cores. Our max temp is right now 80 degrees, and our maximum temp though so far we've hit is 88. So we've not gone above 88 degrees overall in the package. We're doing 98 watts of power right now to that CPU. We've peaked at 106 watts of power to the Intel chip. So the Intel chip pulling a lot of wattage. Going over here to the Ryzen chip, we have got GPU, that's the GPU, we need to go to CPU. CPU package power, we're hitting 95 degrees Celsius on the CPU package, which means, of course, we are thermal throttling a bit. We have maxed at 80 watts of power, and yeah, so it's certainly not hitting as high of wattage, but despite not hitting as high of wattage, we are pulling better performance at 17,147 versus 15,983. Let's go ahead and just do several runs in a row now and see how the performance degrades and what the temperatures are like overall. So typically speaking, on laptops, you will have thermal throttling occurring. And as thermal throttling occurs, your performance will go down. So like this Intel chip is doing this 102 watts. It's not going to be able to sustain 102 watts the whole time. Whereas I'm not sure if this Ryzen chip's going to be able to do the 80 watts the whole time either. You know, so right now it's only doing 75 watts because we're thermal throttling at 95 degrees Celsius. So that's a pretty strong thermal throttle over here. On the G14, where the Stealth 14 is not really thermal throttling. 16,130, 16,976 for the G14. So we're still getting better performance on the G14, despite the fact that we're thermal throttling on the G14 and not thermal throttling on the Stealth 14. So in a sense, I would say this is a win for MSI in the sense that it has better temperatures and we are not thermal throttling, we're power limit throttling, basically, which is great. But then it's also a win for Ryzen because despite the fact that MSI has essentially developed a better cooling solution, the Ryzen chip's still outperforming. So in the end, Asus made the better design choice by going with Ryzen because it's providing more performance despite the thermal throttle. All right, so very interesting. 16,000 and 16,699. So the performance between these two laptops is within 10% of each other, especially as we are thermal throttling here going into these longer runs. I gotta say, this MSI is doing a good job just cranking the juice here at 100. It's doing a good job basically maintaining a high level of wattage. So better than I thought it was going to. Essentially what this tells me is that if you're looking for CPU multi-core performance, the Ryzen chip is probably the way to go by a little bit. But it's such an insignificant difference that it may make a bigger difference depending on how the software is programmed and what kind of encoders it can use. For example, Intel QuickSync tends to be faster than the AMD media encoders that's on the AMD chips when I did my tests in the past. So if your video rendering application can use Intel QuickSync like Premiere, it's probably going to be fastest rendering on Intel, even though it might be a little bit slower here in Cinebench R23. So it's really going to depend on the application, but just in general, I'd say the Ryzen chip is about 7 to 10% faster, okay? At least in terms of raw rendering power. All right, let's move into Timespy now. We're going to do, we are going to do, we're going to do a 50 and 100 overclock to this Stealth 14. All right, so that way we have the exact same levels of overclock applied. All right, 5100. All right, beautiful. Okay. Ooh, this is wanting a lot of updates on the Stealth 14. This might be a little tricky for some of these. I'm going to get some of these downloading. Okay, yes, a lot of these are pretty small. But some of them are a little bit big. So we'll be able to get these updates done, I think, for the vast majority of these games. So cool. Let's go ahead and get Timespy loaded up. And I'm going to need to reposition this. Cool. All right, very good. All right. All right, so we're getting Timespy opened up on both. Bridon says 15K isn't bad. Oh yeah, it's definitely not bad. I think the CPU performance in both of these systems is good enough for great gaming experiences, as well as multi-core rendering and workloads that are like that. You know, I think it's going to be overall suitable for everyone but the highest performance seekers that are trying to just eke out like the best possible performance overall. So, but I mean, that's the kind of person I am. So really, it's not really for me. It's just going to depend on who you are though, and what you seek in a gaming laptop. Okay. So we're going to go in here. Okay, let's go ahead and reopen. See if we can get it to load correctly. Dun 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 do 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 do. King Dragon says it's impressive that Intel is still using a 10 nanometer node, yet they're competing with TSMC 4 and 5 nanometer. I totally agree. It is very impressive that they managed to, I guess, come up with these new architectures with all these extra efficiency cores that are basically, that's what's allowing them to compete, you know? So, all right, so we have Timespy loaded up on this one. Okay. Sure. I believe we are ready to hit go on both of these. Hit run. Hit run. We should be in highest performance mode. Same overclock. Maximum fans enabled on both systems. So we should be like primed and ready. Gotta get this camera set up, hopefully just right. Okay. We've got the overlay. There we go. Now we got the overlay on both. Looks like the G14 is kind of doing a little weird wonkiness. But that's okay. So, all right. So what are we looking at? We're looking at our average wattage. Right now we're doing 90 watts on the Stealth, 106, bouncing around 105-ish on the G14. Our actual clock speeds are around a little over 2400 on both systems, but it appears to me, I think the clock speed is boosting a little higher on the G14 by about 20 to 30 megahertz. So a very small bump in clock speed. Now our actual average FPS appears to be literally identical at 70 and 70 for our average in that scenario. So that tells us that the actual like boots on ground levels of performance is so similar that it's hard to tell. Which is a good thing. Like it, in theory, that's a good thing for the Stealth because the G14 is supposed to be a higher wattage, higher performance part, right? So let's go ahead and just do another test in here. Okay, so we are doing 90 watts and 107 watts. Again, our clock speeds going through the similar areas, 2430 versus 2445, 2475. So about 30 to 40, 50 more watts on the G14. 30 to 45 more megahertz on the clock speed boosting to the GPU, which in theory should translate to slightly better performance. But we'll see, because right now the averages are so close between these two. They're basically mimicking each other shot for shot. Even though the wattage is higher on the G14. It's kind of showing you right now, at least, that the Stealth is holding its own, considering that it has a lower wattage part. So coming into the end here, 58 FPS on average for the Stealth, 58 FPS on average for the G14. So close. I wasn't really paying attention to the temperatures, but I'm pretty sure the temps were a little better on the Stealth overall. I'll have to check the stream. Let me check the stream replay, and we will see what our temperatures were like on both of these systems. So 80 degrees on the CPU for the Stealth, 60 degrees on the CPU for the, 80 degrees on the G14, 60 degrees on the Stealth 14. So 20 degrees cooler on the Intel chip. And on the GPU, the Stealth is about 10 degrees cooler on the GPU as well. So a pretty massive difference in terms of temperatures between these two systems. The Stealth 14 having much better thermal temps given the scenario, and our actual out-the-door performance right here, if I turn it a little bit more so you can see the full 10,557 for our combined score. I don't really look at that very much. I like judging these individually. So our GPU score 10,278, 10,360. Very similar score for our GPU, which is interesting, a little bit lower than when I had tested previously. 12,484 for our CPU score on the Stealth, the Intel chip, providing a little more in this Timespy CPU test, and 11,035 over here on the right. So overall, initial impressions is that the Stealth 14 is putting out a little bit better CPU performance for gaming and quite a bit better temperatures for gaming. That's kind of the big takeaway here for me, is the difference in temperatures, which could make a big difference for you down the line when you actually get down to, for example, if your fans get a little clogged with dust and your system is not cooling quite as efficiently, you might end up thermal throttling a little bit more on the Stealth, on the G14 than you do on the Stealth 14. The other thing is, in terms of if you are in a non-air conditioned environment, like if you need to run the AC at a higher temperature, or you're just in a tropical environment without air conditioning, the Stealth 14 having much better thermals is going to provide better performance in a non-air conditioned environment. So that's kind of the other thing. But given our current levels of performance, the performance in terms of actual gameplay, I think, is going to be neck and neck, super, super tight, super, super close, which is just, it's really great to see. Let's get updating on the Stealth 14. We are going to move into Call of Duty Warzone 2. We're probably going to have to go online to actually do this test. We'll have to see. But yeah. So overall, very impressive performance from both systems, in my opinion. I think that if you're looking after, like, the key thing about the impressive, like, if you're evaluating this, say, versus the competition, is that these systems are so thin and so light, and that's what makes them, I guess, more valuable for their performance levels, because you can get more performance out of systems that are bigger and thicker. Like you could get a 3070 Ti. In terms of raw performance, you can get a 3070 Ti and thicker Legion 5 or even like a used RTX 3080 or maybe a 3080 on sale for around 1600, 1700. And that's going to provide more raw performance for 3D rendering, but you're not going to get that level of performance in something this thin and light. And so, obviously, if you're looking at the Stealth 14 and G14, you're looking for something that's portable you can take with you, and you're going to be able to easily transport this in your backpack, go to class, pull it out, look for decent battery life, all of that, right? That's a huge focus. So for right now, our next test is going to be Warzone 2, but we have to test each laptop individually in order to do this test, because It is an online game, and I do not have two separate entire accounts, so we're gonna have to change the camera here over to this one, and okay, now we should be good. Let's go ahead and zoom in a little bit here. So we're gonna run to the same area. We're gonna capture our average FPS and our 1% low, and then we're gonna switch to the Stealth 14, do the same thing, and then move on to the next game. Thanavor says, update the NVIDIA drivers. I agree. It would be nice to update the NVIDIA drivers. You know what? Yeah, let's just go ahead and try to do a little NVIDIA driver update while we're at it here, because the drivers on this have not been updated in a little while. So let's go ahead and okay. All right, so I'm downloading the drivers here. And we're gonna go ahead and try to update the drivers on both systems here before we continue. Okay, so those are downloading. Looks like Warzone did their update. Let's go ahead and go into Warzone here. And let's check our graphics settings. Let me go back to this other camera so you can see what I'm doing. So the graphics driver updates are downloading right now. That's something I usually try to do that ahead of time, but it's something I forgot to do before the stream started. So we're just going to take care of it real quick. Let's go ahead and move into so we are in custom settings. Basically, we're in minimum. DLSS is enabled. We're on quality DLSS with textures set to high. Okay, everything else is going to be the standard defaults. And cool, so that's good. 165 hertz for the display. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and quit to desktop for now because we need to update our drivers before we do the Warzone test. And we'll just do the Express installation for now. I usually do the clean one, but that usually takes a little bit longer to do. And usually Express works just fine. Yeah, if I have time, I'll do the clean. I do custom and then I do the clean. But since we're time crunching, I'll do the Express, which usually sometimes the clean will fail. Has a little bit higher failure rate in my opinion when you're updating it. But Don asks, is the MSI Stealth GPU and CPU overclockable? So the MSI Stealth GPU is overclockable, and we currently do have an overclock enabled. Okay, so the drivers are being installed right now on both systems at the same time. Beautiful. Does that not remove the OEM customizations? My understanding is that doing the clean install or the express install is going to still be compatible with all the OEM customizations. If you want to wipe out and prevent the OEMs from like setting wattage limits for your VBIOS and other things, you're going to need to download a separate driver that's kind of like jailbroken basically for the laptop. And there are some websites and developers that do that, so that way users that want to control like their power limits more directly can do that. But all of the official NVIDIA drivers are going to be compatible with the OEM customizations like Armory Crate and MSI Center and whatever VBIOS the manufacturers have set up on that laptop. It's still going to be applied and relevant. So that's the key thing to know. That's the key thing to keep in mind. Looks like GeForce Experience is not fully responding right now. It's giving us the loading circle right now. Thiago Albertinez, hey man, I've been taking a look at your lives, especially the 4060 Legion Pro 5 ones, and compared to the 3070 Ti 22 Helios, if it's worth getting one or the other. I think that the 3070 Ti 22 Helios 300 could be worth buying if you don't care about frame generation, and it's the same price. It's probably a 3070 Ti Helios 300, I think, is going to have a little higher raw rasterization performance, but then in games that have frame generation, it's going to be behind the 4060 in terms of smoothness of gameplay and overall enjoyment, I think, for those newer titles that implement DLSS 3. That's kind of my take on that. So it looks like GeForce Experience has failed on the Stealth 14, on the Zephyrus G14 here. We are going to, I guess we're going to have to close the program and try reopening it. Did our driver update go through? Yes, we are on the latest drivers now, 535.98 on both of the laptops, so that's great to see. Let's go ahead and try going back into Warzone now. Thiago, been worried about the Legion 5 Pro temps. Do you think your unit is bad, or is it, or it's the need Legion's standard? I believe you mean the new Legion standard. Yeah, I think that is going to be standard. The Ryzen chips, so far every Ryzen laptop I have tested has been spicy temps. I think it has to do with the really small chip on the board not being able to transfer heat as efficiently as the Intel chips, which have a wider die. That's my understanding. But yeah, you'll see here. We're about to test Warzone 2 with this Ryzen chip, and you'll see that it should get very spicy temperatures. But I want to know for sure. So it's one of those things where it's like I'm not 1000% certain yet, because I want to like take my Legion 5 Pro 5 apart and actually repaste it, and I want to do that in a live stream. I just got distracted. I need to order CPU paste or whatever I'm going to do to repaste it, and I want to just see if I can make any improvements to it or not. And if I'm unable to improve it, then it's just, to me, that's more confirmation that that's just the new standard for the Legion Pro 5. So Now, the one thing that I don't like running Warzone 2 is all these shadows jumping around. When you have the shadows on such a low setting, it like causes that artifacting, which is very, I think, noticeable in these menus and stuff. I don't think it's as noticeable in actual gameplay, but pretty annoying in this menu. The new gen laptops seem to be a lot more aggressive on CPU wattage and less aggressive on GPUs. Well, I think what you're talking about is that a lot of the games these days, a lot of the gaming laptops, they've shifted their thermal design from being GPU focused with a little bit on the CPU to being very much CPU GPU heatsink shared with shared heat pipes or a vapor chamber that shares the cooling potential between the two. And that really shifts how a laptop cools itself. And then in addition, on top of that, you're also talking about a big shift in GPU power requirements. The RTX 3060, 3070 really liked going all the way to 130 watts, 150 watts for the 3070 Ti. And you can't even do that really on these new 4000 series. It's like irrelevant going that high. Right? So interesting. Running into some interesting problems right now with Warzone 2. This is live, whatever's happening here. So, I mean, I've got airflow here. Something is not jiving right. We were running into some glitches in the whoa. Okay. Super weird. All right, super weird. Things seem to be running just fine now, though. That's interesting. Yeah, I'm guessing we need to restart the G14, so I'm just going to go ahead and exit. Exit and reboot. You know, while this is rebooting, let's go ahead and move into a camera test for both of these laptops. So we're also downloading the updates for this driver. So here's the Stealth 14 camera. I am pretty sure this is a 720p cam. It is noticeably not amazing. I would say it's the kind of thing that you're going to really notice the quality when you zoom in on these kinds of images. Notice that there's not much detail on the hairs or the eyebrows. It's all kind of pixelated and very noisy. All right, let's try the G14 out. So right now we're doing Windows Hello. And let's go back into camera. All right, so I can already tell the G14 camera is quite a bit superior. So right there you can see, I mean, it's not, here, come around a little more. There we go. So there's that, and let me go ahead and take a photo. Okay, and we zoom in. We at least have a bit more detail on the hairs, but it's really, honestly, it's not that much better. It's pretty similar. But this is a 1080p webcam, and I think the Stealth 14 is a 720p webcam. So let me double check that though real quick on their specs page. So right here, yeah, so it says it's a 720p Windows Hello cam, So that's part of the issue that we're dealing with. And the G14 is definitely a 1080p webcam, but it is a little bit better, but it's not that much better, you know? I would say the colors are better on the G14 camera. Like very white washed, not very warm on the colors for the Stealth 14. Okay, let's try loading back into Warzone. See if we can get this to work correctly now. So, loading into the G14, you know, one other thing we're going to need to check, we'll need to go into Armory Crate here and just make sure that we're in the same manual mode, because sometimes it puts you back into turbo. See, it put us into turbo mode. So we're going to go back into manual mode, and we're going to apply them. Cool. All right. Okay, things seem to be loading much better just in the menus and everything. So I'm pretty sure whatever issue we were dealing with was just because we needed to restart the machine after the driver update. Cool, cool, cool. Stealth is doing updates on all the games we're going to be testing, which is good. So in some ways this delay is good because we're getting all our ducks in a row to be able to do the full testing on both machines. All right. Let me pull up chat again. Thiago says, last gen CPU power was around 40 watts when gaming and GPU was on 150 watts. This gen, I see a lot of 80 plus watts on CPU and not more than 100 on the GPU. So the RTX 40, 50, 60, 70, those GPUs don't really need more than about 100 watts to maximize the GPU performance. Really, it needs around 90 to 105 watts to get close to peak performance. Above 105 watts, there's very minimal to no returns on increasing the wattage for the RTX 40, 50, 60, and 70. Now, the RTX 4080 and 4090, they really want to go all the way to 175 watts, and the performance curve continues to go up all the way to the 175 watt level. So that's like the big difference in terms of last generation to this generation, RTX 3000 series. It really, like the 3060, 3070, 3080, all of those really wanted to push higher levels of wattage above 105 watts. So the fact that NVIDIA made the 40, 50, 60, and 70 all max out at 105 watts essentially makes it so that CPU focus on the thermals can be brought more into light, I guess. The CPU can become a larger portion of the thermal threshold or thermal load on the laptop without reducing GPU performance like what you would have seen in last generation. So yeah, that's one of the biggest differences between these two generations, generation on generation at least, you know. See, someone's right here. Let's go ahead and cut parachute. Let's see if we can kill someone. Got him. And we got from the side. Okay, so right now our FPS is also much better than we were. You know, before we were doing like 60 FPS or something, and it was bad stuttering and all that. Our FPS is looking pretty dang good, and it is super smooth. Doing 90 FPS right now. What GPU is in the G14? This is an RTX 4060 in both of the laptops. We are doing the G14 first, and then we're going to do the Stealth 14 next. So notice that in the plane here, we're doing a little over 100 FPS. And then now once we get down to the ground, we'll have like a new FPS that we're hitting. Just want to make sure that our graphics are still set to the correct. Yeah, everything should be still correct. It's all looking good. This is going to be pretty difficult to jump all the way there, so we're going to cut and redeploy parachutes. That's cool. Look at that sandstorm over by the city or whatever that is. Is that a thunderstorm? I don't know. That's cool that it exists, though. So we're just going to cut and redeploy. So note that we're doing 96 FPS with 50 FPS for our 1% low so far. And that's when we're up in the sky. This feels buttery smooth to play with these settings and everything. Okay, so here's our FPS test running down this bridge. This is the key metric we're going to be looking at. We've got 92 FPS, 91 FPS, 70 for our 1% low. That is extremely good. So 92, 70. We've got an enemy right in front of us. We're probably about to die to this guy. That's okay. We've basically done our test that we wanted to do. Let's go ahead and try to fight him. He's got a gun, probably. Where did he go? I wish I had headphones. Okay, he got us. So 88.63. 88.63 for our overall average. But, yeah, very impressively smooth gameplay and fluid, which is great to see. I mean, that's basically exactly what we're looking for in a Warzone gameplay. I mean, not quite. Like, we would love to see more like higher FPS, right? Like the higher performance laptops with the i9, you know, with the higher end Ryzen chips with the thicker chassis, they were doing 130 to 155 FPS in Warzone. So yeah, this is definitely lower levels of performance than what you're going to get in the high end laptops. But for something that's portable, like that meets the basic requirements for high levels of competitive play. Because 90 FPS is good for fast response rate esports gaming. That's kind of like the minimum. And then the fact that the 1% lows were so high was awesome. Because sometimes, you know, you might have 120 FPS, but your 1% low is like 25. And that means that you're getting a lot of chop in the actual gameplay, which is not what you want. So getting 90 FPS with 60 for our 1% low means that we're getting consistently awesome performance. So that's very, very good for the G14. We are now looking at the Stealth 14. We're going to double check our settings and then go into a match. Brett Allen says the 4060 amazes me. What is so amazing to you about it? Just the fact that it can put such high FPS for such a low wattage? Is that the part that's amazing? I do think that is probably the biggest strength or strong suit to this laptop, or to the 4060 GPU in general. Okay, looks like we're already set. All the settings are correct from the last time we tested it. So we're gonna go to Warzone 2. Battle Royale solos. Let's go ahead and get into a match. Airsoft Bros. I thought the G14 felt more premium than the MSI Stealth when I played with them at Best Buy. I think so. So Airsoft Bros. I would have thought that myself, if I didn't know that the Stealth 14 was made from magnesium alloy. So the Stealth 14 is basically a metal chassis, where the G14 is, I believe, more plasticky material. The thing is, the Stealth 14's material can kind of pass off as like some people might just guess that it's plastic, you know. So, and there are some plastic pieces on the Stealth 14 still. But yeah, in terms of overall build quality, I think they're both very similar. I think the Stealth 14's like chassis and body, when it's the white chassis, feels more premium to me. Because it's like white and black, the color scheme looks better, and it competes better with the G14 in my opinion. So anyway, we'll have to see. Okay, so here we are. A lot of people loading in. We're already doing higher FPS. Where'd this guy run off to? Okay, whatever. Oh, he murdered me. Okay, so we're doing 109 FPS, 68 for our 1% low. We're definitely seeing some performance advantages right now with this Intel chip. And this is even in more of a city environment. So that's good. All right, so here we are in the airplane now, you know, on the Ryzen chip. We were doing like 105 FPS. With the Intel chip, we're doing 137. Warzone 2 is definitely one of those games that so far in all my testing has favored Intel significantly. So that is important context that we may not see this level of performance difference for CPU performance in the other games that we play. All right. So dropping into the same exact location. Looking at our temperatures are phenomenal on the Stealth right now. 65, 74. Coming in, we're landing. We redid our average. I'm just gonna do this one more time because there's a guy in the... Okay, so we're running. We're doing 103.65 right now. This is what, about a 15% performance gain. We did 90. I believe we had 90 FPS on average for the... Well, we got murdered again by the people. Congratulations. You murdered us. But we got our test in, so that's good. 102.64. So very similar 1% lows, but higher FPS average. To me means that this Stealth 14 is the superior Warzone 2 gameplay. So far today, we've done our Cinebench R23 and the G14 won that. And now in... Yeah, so the G14... So I'm trying to do a tally of all the things we've won so far. The G14 won Cinebench R23. The G14 won the Timespy GPU score. but the Stealth 14 won the CPU score, so that's 2-1 so far for the G14, and now the Stealth 14 winning this one gives, in my opinion, the advantage to the Stealth 14 in this game. So that brings us 2-2. Oh yeah, we won. AFK guy. So overall, definitely, I think a better gaming experience in Warzone 2 on the Stealth 14. Whee! Okay, so this is a random area of the map. Extremely responsive, very fluid gameplay in Warzone 2. Let's move on to our next game, just because we need to continue moving through all these tests. And let's go ahead and do offline, enter offline mode. Okay, very nice. Let's go ahead and do Cyberpunk 2077. So far, we are at 2-2 on terms of benchmark wins for these two laptops. All right. And for speaker quality, what was it? It was basically like the G14 had better bass, but the Stealth 14 had better mids and highs. So that's kind of like a tie as well. So that basically puts us at 3-3. Gizmo, does the vapor chamber in the Stealth 14 need thermal repaste compared to the regular heat pipes? So as far as I can tell, the Stealth 14 does, at least mine is excellently pasted. Sometimes you can get improvements in the vapor chamber cooling performance by repasting it, but MSI at least did a great job on this unit that I have. So I would have to see the other laptops out there to see how they perform, you know. We're going to need to go to split screen benchmark mode. All right, so it's going to be something like that. We're going to go to our settings. We're going to go to Full HD Plus. So all of our tests today will be at the 16:10 Full HD Plus resolution. So we need to make sure that we're always changing that on the G14. All right, and for our graphics, we're on Ray Tracing Ultra, DLSS on quality with frame generation enabled. So for our graphics, we're going to go to Ray Tracing Ultra, DLSS on quality. All right, and I'm just going to double change this to make sure that the change went through. All right, very nice. Okay. All settings appears to be identical. Let's go ahead and run the benchmarks. Oh, interesting. All right. Looks like we need to change the font size of the G14's window to be a little bit higher. So far right here off the beginning, we're doing about 73 FPS on the Stealth 14, and in the G14 doing about 80. So a bit of an advantage for the G14 in this scenario. Looking at our GPU boost clock, it's quite a bit higher on the Zephyrus G14, 2550 on the G14, only 2475 in the 2400s, now 2300s, 2200s. Definitely maintaining that higher boost clock, which I believe that's the primary reason we're translating into higher FPS. I also want to check my Afterburner to make sure that we have all of our appropriate stats on the both of these. Right now, the wattage is not showing up on the Stealth 14, and the CPU stats are not showing up for the Zephyrus G14, so we might need to bring those into the overlay with HWInfo. Overall, reaching high levels of performance on both systems. Our 1% low is much better on the Zephyrus G14, 64 FPS versus 31 FPS for the lows. So the Zephyrus G14 doing much better on the lows, much better. And our overall FPS being 83.21 is a pretty massive gain over the 70. Is that 71? I'm not sure here. Let me adjust this. Let's go 550. Nope, we're going to go 400. So 75.3 versus 83.21. That is an 8 FPS gain for the Zephyrus G14. I believe primarily because of the increased wattage to that GPU, as well as the 1% low being much better. Our min FPS was 38.4. Our min FPS for the Zephyrus G14, 70.73. Now, this is a game that tends to push our VRAM limitations, but it appears that the Ryzen chip really boosting our 1% lows. Very interesting. Very, very interesting result here. Let's pull up HWInfo and just make sure that we have everything going on both of these. CPU usage not activated, but CPU 16 usage. Okay, it is activated. Yeah, so we don't have clock speed or CPU temp. So let's get those going in HWInfo. All right, and so I believe this is going to be our best option for that, and then we need our temperature and package power. Okay, core effective clock, CPU package power. Okay, looks like we need to go to here and turn off the label. We're also going to go here and turn down the size a little bit more. Okay. So there's our core effective clock, our temperature, and our wattage for the CPU. So overall, that's a big win for the Zephyrus G14 in Cyberpunk 2077. Congratulations, Zephyrus G14. Let's go into our GPU power. Let's add this into the overlay. Okay, so now we have our GPU power limits on the Stealth 14. Go ahead and close this game down. Let's move into Dead Space. Dead Space being a very CPU-oriented game test. It's not going to be, usually it doesn't slam the GPU, but maybe at 1080p. Yeah, 1080p should be even more CPU bound than typical, but this is only an RTX 4060, so we may actually be CPU bound even at 1080p. Hard to say yet. I want to quit OneDrive, and now we need to open this up again. Okay. Airsoft Pro says, what is your favorite laptop so far in 2023? My favorite laptop is probably the Blade 18. That's the laptop I'm currently using. The primary reason is because it packs full amounts of power, like full powered RTX 4080, 4090, and nearly full powered i9 chips. And the Intel chips pack the best performance in the games that I play. But the Ryzen 9 7945HX chips are also awesome and pack a wallop of performance. So I think the Legion Pro 7 is likely to be an excellent choice as well. Yeah, so we're just loading in right now. I want to point out that right now the Ryzen chip is maxing the temperature at 95 degrees, 61 watts of power, 100% CPU utilization there. And we were not maxing the power or the temperatures over here on the Stealth 14. So just another minor note, I guess. So we're in ultra settings, DLSS on quality. Our resolution, we want to be at 1920 by 1200. All right, so there we are. We are loaded in on the Stealth 14. We're just getting loaded in on the G14 still. Keep in mind, some of the games on the G14 are on an external SSD, which is going to impact loading times a little bit more than the Stealth 14. It is an SSD, but it's not quite as fast as an internal SSD would be. It's okay, Hero. There we go. All right, we gotta make sure we're at the correct resolution first. Beautiful. All right, and let's go ahead and check our settings. Quality, ultra quality graphics preset and DLSS on quality. Okay, so here we are. We're in the same exact section, loaded in, just at the little initial loading period. Let's take a look and evaluate. We are currently pulling 72 watts, 79 watts of power to the Stealth, 87 FPS, 38 for a 1% lows, 44, 40, 37 watts to the Intel CPU, 3.6 gigahertz. We are GPU bound at 100% GPU utilization. Over here on the Zephyrus G14, 92 watts of power, which is almost 20 watts, 10 to 20 watts more power than the Stealth. We are doing a little bit higher clock on the GPU at 2550. We are only at 86, 89, 91%, 94% GPU utilization, so we are not slamming that GPU quite as hard, which shows us that we're right balanced between CPU and GPU utilization in terms of bottlenecking. Our RAM speed at 9 gigs utilized versus 10 gigs utilized is interesting. Our VRAM is almost the same Not quite. It's about 600 more megabytes over here on the G14, which is interesting. So let's go ahead and just reposition a little bit over here to the doorway on both systems. All right, and we'll go ahead and move out of the airlock, get to the center of the ramp here. We'll turn and kind of center up a little bit here. And we'll start walking. I'm just going to do a refresh on our benchmark numbers. So right now, the performance is pretty dang close. Our 1% lows are a bit better on the Intel chip at 40 FPS versus 26 over here on the Ryzen, which is interesting. I wonder if it's because we're thermal throttling so hard it's causing a bit of 1% low dips. Hard to say what the exact cause is, but we are definitely being more GPU bound on the Intel chip, hitting 100% GPU utilization much more frequently, which is very interesting to see. I would say our average FPS between these two is very competitive, but our 1% low being quite a bit better over here on the Intel gives me a distinct impression of a win for the Intel in Dead Space for the Stealth 14. All right, we're going to go ahead and walk forward. I believe we are very centered. Okay, all right. We're going to go ahead and reset. This is our official benchmark area for Dead Space. We are walking 82 versus 83 FPS. Our 1% lows aren't quite as divergent yet. 37 versus 28. That is going to be not hyper noticeable, but maybe just a little bit noticeable. You know, very minor. But I would say it's enough of a difference to give a win to the Stealth 14 as long as these this data maintains throughout the rest of this test. So we ended up getting 89 FPS on the Stealth, 38 for a 1% lows, quite a bit better, 13 FPS better, about a 50% gain basically in our 1% lows, which is the opposite of what we saw in Cyberpunk 2077. So super interesting. We get a win back for the Stealth 14, bringing us to 4-4 for our benchmarking battle between these two laptops. All right, so we are going to do God of War next. Let's go ahead and get God of War running. ARP says, Ryzen chip so hot. Yes, that is, I think that could be the reason why we're seeing better performance on the Intel in this scenario. Just because it is super efficient at running, I guess, dispersing the heat. The Intel chip is being more efficient at dispersing the heat. And with the Ryzen chip being 95 degrees, it's a pretty consistently warmer, hotter experience. And very important to keep in mind that we are basically running these GPU, CPUs as close to as possible to one another, you know? So I think this is as fair of a test as we're going to see. So right now it's patching the data in the background for God of War. It's estimating 1 minute remaining. Let's go ahead and move on to fixing up our test here. So we want 16 by 10. DLSS on quality. That is excellent. That's exactly what we're looking for. Let's go to our graphics settings. Ultra preset. Very good. Let's go ahead and load in. Ninja Warrior asks, what difference focus on screen between Blade 18 and Titan GT77 except the resolution? The The Blade 18 is not a mini LED display, so that means that it's not going to have as high of peak brightness or as high of contrast. The mini LED display is going to look a lot like an OLED display. If you've ever looked at an OLED display, it's going to be more in that vein, not quite to the quality of an OLED, because mini LEDs do have bloom. So the Blade 18 would not have bloom. Bloom being the kind of white halo effect when you have like a really bright object on a dark background. You'll get kind of like a whitewashing around that white object against the darkness because of the mini LEDs kind of spilling their light onto the other areas of the screen right around it. So that's essentially the biggest thing about the, to me, that's the biggest difference between a mini LED and a non-mini LED laptop like the Blade 18. Blade 18 is not going to have as high a contrast ratio, but there will be no bloom, and the Blade 18 and the GT77 both have excellent color gamut. And I'd say the Blade 18 is still an excellent display. Very good display overall. It's just not going to be as contrasty or quite as peaky bright. So those are the key differences. I hope that's helpful. In terms of actual performance, you know, they're going to be in the same ballpark of performance, but in general, the GT77 Titan should outperform the Blade 18 by a little bit in some games. But the big advantage for the Blade 18 in terms of performance is that it does have faster memory. So DDR5 5600 versus only 4000 or 3600 on the GT77. That's going to be a distinct advantage in CPU-bound games. So, okay. So we're in full HD, 16:10, DLSS on quality. We're on ultra preset. We are, I believe, ready to go for this test. Let's do a quick evaluation before we start moving. Right now, the G14 pulling 5 FPS more than the Stealth 14. Pretty sure this is going to be a win for the G14 because of the increased wattage. Look at us, only doing 78 watts, 73 watts right here to the GPU, 98 watts for the G14, pulling higher levels of performance. But look at those temperatures, hitting 87 degrees over here on the G14. Okay, so we're hitting high temps. That means higher wattage means higher temps. The Stealth 14, in theory, maybe could go to the same level of wattage and get the same level of performance, but basically MSI said, you know what, we're gonna just say we'll get better temperatures and we'll give up a little bit of that performance. Where Asus went all out, let's go better temps, better performance, worse temps, whatever. This is going to be a really good example. Let's go ahead and try bringing down the temps on the G14 before we progress further. And I'm going to do that in manual mode here by just changing one setting. I'm going to go into GPU mode, and I'm just going to do GPU target 75 degrees. All right, this is going to thermal throttle our GPU to 75 degrees. At least in theory, let's see if this works. This is the first time I'm ever trying this. All right, so now we are running it again. The GPU is supposed to target down to 75 degrees. Right now, it's actually only hitting 80 degrees. Interesting. Our GPU wattage is doing 70 watts, which is worse than the Stealth, and the Stealth still has better performance. Interesting. So, assuming you're trying to hit the same GPU power limit target, it would certainly appear that the Stealth 14 has a superior cooling system installed, or set up on the system. In terms of being able to disperse the exact same amount of wattage with maximum fans enabled on both systems like we have currently set up. So pretty interesting little quick result. We're obviously letting it trying to see if it can balance down to 75 degrees on the GPU. Right now the temperature is still coming down, 78. Notice our CPU temps are a huge difference. Right now, 90 degrees on the Ryzen chip, 77 on the GPU, 70, yeah, and 73, 75 over here on the Stealth 14. It feels like the Intel chip is maybe part of the advantage for the Stealth 14. Like the Ryzen chip is just pushing a lot of heat into the dual, the shared vapor chamber, which is making the GPU run hotter as well on the Zephyrus G14. So I think that's part of the issue to be considering in this scenario. Yeah, very interesting. Okay. So assuming the same GPU target, I think the Stealth 14 has an advantage. Let's go ahead and unthrottle this GPU back to 87 degrees. I'm mainly showing you this to show you that you can rein in the temperatures on the G14 and still get good performance, but it is going to affect your bottom line for your FPS benchmark numbers, right? It's definitely going to negatively impact your performance if you're thermal throttling your system. Okay, that makes sense, right? Our 1% lows are very similar, around 40. Our overall averages do have an advantage for the G14. Let's go ahead and run through this. Here we go. Pretty noticeable advantage for the G14 here, just from that GPU wattage level. 68 FPS versus 62 FPS. Our 1% lows also being noticeably higher for the G14 at 55. That Ryzen chip really pushing the 1% lows. Though this doesn't feel bad in terms of 1% lows. The G14 just feels a little smoother, Pretty interesting. So I would say that's a win for the G14. That brings us 5 for the G14 to 4 for the Stealth 14. Awesome. Let's move on to the next game. Okay, so I'd love to do Dying Light 2 next. We are still patching Dying Light 2. It's estimating 1 minute remaining. Let's go ahead and get Dying Light 2 loaded in on the G14. Ninja Warrior says, appreciated for your answer. No problem, man. I hope that's helpful. Okay. I'm going to grab a little more water. I'll be right back while we're downloading Dying Light 2. Wow, it's estimating 3 minutes left now for the update on Dying Light 2. Yeah, I tried going through and updating everything in Steam on these, but I guess the key is you've really got to actually try loading the games, because I did enable like I did open Steam. I did try to make sure they had an opportunity to update overnight. The laptops were running and everything, but it just didn't go through the actual update process on some of these games. Maybe it just didn't try to check it or something. Okay, so we have high quality ray tracing preset, 1920 by 1200 for our preset here on the display. And NVIDIA Reflex is on, upscale mode is DLSS on quality. Frame generation is on. That's all correct. So the G14 should be ready to benchmark once this is done downloading. Yeah, so I had someone come to the door here during the live stream a few minutes ago, and I'm afraid it probably was the ROG Ally delivery that I missed just now. So we'll see if I end up getting it today or not. I might not get it today. I might have to deliver it tomorrow. Attrition says, my MSI Raider was running hot like 95 degrees Celsius constantly. Finally got the courage to open it up and try repasting. Is it normal for the manufacturing to half-ass the thermal paste? Attrition, oftentimes it is. It frequently happens, which is why a lot of people do choose to repaste their laptop if they have bad temperatures out of the box. So it's, you know, it's something that, like, usually they do a good enough job that the computer can run at least mostly good, but temperatures may be hot. And they may thermal throttle or reduce performance in certain scenarios. And then when you go and repaste it, suddenly, bam, it's like, okay, 10 degrees cooler, and then now it's not thermal throttling. You can actually increase performance. But that really depends on the laptop. And this year so far, I've seen a consistent trend of Ryzen CPUs running really hot almost all the time. And it's kind of thing that I basically come to expect when I go to benchmark a Ryzen Zen 4 chip. It's going to be hot. It's going to go 95 degrees almost all the time. Attrition says, drop from 95 degrees Celsius to 60 degrees when under load. That's a huge drop. Yeah, and that, like, and sometimes that sounds like a really egregious CPU paste job or GPU paste job. I'm guessing that's a CPU because 95 is what a CPU would thermal throttle at. So yeah, normally it's not that big of a drop. Like, but sometimes, like, the CPU paste is, like, just so bad that it's like, it's almost like it's not pasted, which is kind of what we had on, it's kind of what we had on, what's it called? The Alienware M18 that I had. It instantly shot up to 99 degrees Celsius the moment you started to load, which is not normal. Normally, it's supposed to kind of ramp up and accumulate temperature and offload into the heat pipes or vapor chamber or whatever. So yeah. But yeah, if you are running into a situation where you're instantly hitting, like, thermal throttle temperatures, that's almost a for sure indicator that your system could have big performance or at least temperature improvements by having a repaste. So, but if you're already in a good temperature range on your CPU and GPU, then you probably don't need to repaste right away. You can probably wait a couple years before you repaste, and you may not need to repaste for even 4 or 5 years and still have good temperatures. It's just gonna depend a lot on the quality of the CPU paste, the type of CPU paste, because some of the cheaper quality CPU paste will really want to get a paste job much sooner. Okay, we should be good to go here on our benchmark for Dying Light 2. Here we go. So we're on high quality, ray tracing enabled, DLSS on quality, frame generation is enabled. So should be very comparable performance. Or should be exactly the same settings. And wow, 19 FPS. Really? 108. Okay. I'm impressed. I didn't think that, I didn't remember it being so high on the FPS. The RTX 4060 is just crushing it in this game. Again, with frame generation games, I tend to recommend getting more than 90 FPS if you can. So that way, the artificially generated frames, the AI generated frames, are excellent between the frames. Like, right? Like if there's enough real frames that the AI generated frames are not as, they don't stand out. The little artifacts they cause are not as glitchy or not as noticeable. All right, so looking at our temperatures, again, the Stealth 14 is about 15 degrees cooler on our GPU, 71 here up on the left, 87 watts to the GPU, 105 watts of power to the Zephyrus G14. Our FPS average, though, is crushing it on the Zephyrus G14, 106 to 97 so far during this test. That is a huge advantage to the G14, but it comes at a temperature cost. And like what I would probably want to see in this scenario is kind of a blend between these two in terms of wattage levels. Okay, so we ended up with 111 FPS, 112 FPS when we went to the black screen over there on the right, and 103 FPS on the Stealth 14, which means we get another win for the G14, but we're also getting thermal wins for the Stealth 14. So the G14 pulling significantly more FPS. Right here, according to the median FPS, 101 versus 109.9. So that's basically around a 9 FPS gain. But according to the MSI Afterburner, it was more like a 10 FPS gain, approximately 9 to 10 FPS. So overall, that's another win for the Zephyrus G14, which puts us at, believe... The last time it was it 5-4 or 6-4? I'm gonna need to check the stream. Let me check the stream. Okay, let's check. So God of War 5-4. So now we are 6-4 with the G14 leading our benchmark battle. We are going to move into our next game. We'll do Shadow of the Tomb Raider next. So this is going to be highest settings, exclusive full screen, 1920 by 1200 resolution on both. So exclusive full screen, 1920 by 1200, highest settings, ray tracing on ultra. There we go. Okay. Masquerade says, give me a Razer with max specs. Yeah, ARP says 4 to 6. That is correct. Stealth 14 winning 4 times. G14 winning 6 times. Though I think at the end of the day, we are going to count one of them being a thermal... thermal temperatures counts for a win somewhere, So I think that'll be one of our things we're going to value. All right, so we should be all identical settings. Let's go ahead and run benchmark in 3, 2, 1. This one's going to be interesting because we do have RAM and CPU differences, and this is 1080p, which tends to make this game a little bit more, well, this is full HD 1200p, really. But I would not be surprised if Intel pulls a win here, or Ryzen. I don't know. Like they're both pretty close. In theory, the G14 does have faster RAM at 4800, DDR5 4800, and the Stealth 14 has DDR5 4000. So I went over these spec differences at the beginning, but this is a game where we might see that RAM coming into play. And we also may have seen that come into play, the RAM speed come into play for our 1% lows when the Ryzen was winning in our 1% low battles. Like right now, our 1% low is 43 versus 72. So much higher 1% lows for the Zephyrus G14 once again. Of course, our wattage level doing about 105 watts on the G14 versus 81 watts on the Stealth 14. 73, 66 for our temperatures though. 84, 83, 81 for our temperatures on the G14. So at least we're not thermal throttling on either the G14's CPU or GPU though, which is really good to see. All right, let's see what we get here for the big opening here. 190 FPS. It's a bit higher. Our peak FPS is higher on the Stealth 14 when looking up on the mountain, which is a little surprising. I would think that would be a very GPU bound part of the test. Very interesting. Our overall averages now for the overall test has reached a higher FPS on the Stealth 14 according to Afterburner, but we'll have to see. 112 for the Stealth 14, 106 for the G14. This might be a win for the Stealth 14 because of the Intel CPU. We're also running into thermal throttling right now on the G14, hitting that 86, 87 degrees threshold, and our GPU wattage is dropping down into the 90s instead of being up in the hundreds. So I think a laptop cooling pad would likely be the right choice for the Zephyrus G14. You might be able to get a bit more FPS pulled out of the system if you have something shoving more air up into the chassis. Okay, now we get to find out our actual true results for this benchmark, because we don't know what the true results are until it actually shows us. 108 FPS on the Stealth 14 versus 103 for the G14. Even though the G14 started out strong, it ended up falling behind to the Intel Stealth 14. And very interesting. Very interesting. So now we are 5 wins for the Stealth 14. So that's five wins for the Stealth 14 and 6 wins for the Zephyrus G14. Very interesting. Let's move into our next test. Dun, dun, dun. Let's do The Witcher 3 next. Vitalik says, what is the difference between a 4060 and 4070 in the Lenovo Legion with the same CPU and RAM? Is it worth paying extra for the 4070 if I use laptop for only a few games? The 4070 is primarily gonna be faster in the, just raw GPU performance. It's not gonna make much of a difference for media encoding. The 4080 and 4090 have an extra media encoder built into the GPU. It basically have twice as many, double the media encoding potential for certain types of media. So that's the key difference between the 4080, 4090, but the 4050, 4060, and 4070 have the same media encoder, but so if you're using this primarily for the media encoding aspect, that's something to keep in mind. But there is a difference, of course, in CUDA cores and overall performance, but it's not a massive difference between a 4060 and 4070. It's only about a 10% performance gain for between a 4060 and 4070. So if you are on a budget, you want to save some money, and you're not that big of a gamer, it's totally fine to just go with a 4060 versus a 4070. It's not going to be a huge difference. Almost everything that's going to be playable on a 4060 will be playable on a 4070. But a 4070 will basically have a bit more performance chops and be a bit more future-proof. So, like if I was on a budget and I was saving money, I would probably get a 4060 over a 4070, unless the 4070 was only like $100 more. If it's like $250 more, not worth the upgrade probably. Maybe up to $150 more for the increased price. So basically that's my rule of thumb. If you're trying to get value, bang for the buck, $150 upgrade for the 4070 versus 4060. If everything else is the same. But like, you know, sometimes you get the 4070 version, it has a better screen or a better CPU and more RAM or all of that. That all makes a big difference, right? So, okay, ray tracing is on ultra, DLSS is set to quality. Frame generation is enabled. We want to go to 1200 resolution. Okay, excellent. We are ready to continue. Let's just make sure we're getting the exact same save. Cool. All right, and we got to reposition our camera a little bit. There we go. So Vitalik, I hope that is helpful for you to figure out the differences there. Okay, so here we are loaded in. We're going to give it a chance to figure itself out for about 10-15 seconds. So right off the bat, again, the G14 pulling higher levels of wattage as well as higher levels of performance, as you'd expect with that wattage. 78 FPS for the Stealth, 84 for the Zephyrus. Our 1% lows are also better with the Zephyrus at 57 versus 37. And 1% lows can be very tricky to get on The Witcher 3, and they're very important for smooth gameplay. Because sometimes 1% lows can be quite bad in this game. Especially as you'll load into new areas. And I'm guessing our 1% lows will drop on both systems as I start turning the mouse around and looking around. Maybe not. That's good. The Stealth 14 appears to be running quite well. All right, so this is good. So far averaging 76 FPS. We're going to get set up. And we're going to run around with the Zephyrus. Very nice and smooth on the Zephyrus. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and reset our FPS counters again. In this new area, looks like we're getting about 73 to 77. Again, our 1% lows are better on the Zephyrus in The Witcher 3. We're going to turn around and we're going to do a bit of a running test. At least in the rough area where we're benchmarking here. I actually recently, yesterday, started playing The Witcher 3 campaign again, because this is a game I've been wanting to beat so badly for a while now. And so yeah, I'm really stoked on the story right now in The Witcher 3, and I cannot wait to finish this game. It is potentially my favorite game of all time. I'm being honest. Like, I don't know why I stopped playing it. It is just such a good game. Anyway, all right, so we're gonna go ahead and run through. You know, one thing I want to point out is the Stealth 14 is such a warmer screen color right now than the G14. And I think I prefer the G14's color ambience. Like this is almost like the blue light is being taken out a bit. And we're getting more of a reddish tint. But I'm pretty sure we can change this in the MSI color software if you want it to be more bluish. Anyway, all right, so we're going to go ahead and start our benchmark. And we're going to start running. We're running. We're running. We are running. We are going to center up correctly here. And can we make the jump? We made the jump on both systems. It's amazing. This is so hard to do. Into the water with both systems. Wow, our 1% lows really struggled on the Zephyrus there, loading into the water. What happened there? That was interesting. Stutter. Now we're swimming. Our 1% lows still have not recovered on the Zephyrus. Super interesting that it had such a big struggle there. Everything appears to be smooth now. It's just like jumping off the platform messed with it or something. I don't know. It's interesting though. All right, so 78 versus 76. I guess this is a win for the Stealth because of that stutter for the Zephyrus, but in reality, like, I feel like it should be a win for the Zephyrus because it was just a one-off stutter. I bet if we retested it, we would have better performance on the Zephyrus with our 1% lows being so much higher on the Zephyrus. Like, if I was picking between the two laptops, I would buy the Zephyrus unless that 1% huge stutter happened a lot. But like that happened one time. I don't think it's gonna happen to us again. You know, so very interesting. Yeah, so I'm gonna give this a win to the Zephyrus just because the 1% lows is weird. We had a weird stutter, but the Zephyrus I think is the right one to win this. So right now we are 7 for the Zephyrus, 5 for the Stealth 14. Let's go. We got one more game I think to test for today to round out our benchmarks. Let's see, which one do we want to do? Do we want to do Control? Yeah. There's a part of me that wants to do Hogwarts. Yeah, let's do Hogwarts. Even though Hogwarts, it's a bit of a pain in the butt to get Hogwarts to work in offline mode. So we have to go online, then we have to load it, and then we exit the game, and then we can load back in. It's really weird. The offline support for Hogwarts is really messed up. Kalen says, why not give a win to them both since they both had benefits? One had a higher average and one had better stable 1% lows. Well, the thing is, the Zephyrus G14 had higher 1% lows except for that one stutter. And so I'm not sure what happened with that one stutter that caused the 1% lows. It was like when we were falling off that ledge, like it had to load in or something. I don't know. It was just really weird. So that's why, that's the reason why. Like, I feel like if I were to test it 10 times, I don't think the Zephyrus would have that 1% big stutter happen very often. So, Rafiki says, do you think MSI is doing the right thing in the Stealth 14 and 16 versus G14 and M16 in terms of good temp and fan noise? I'm not sure about the Stealth 16, but with the Stealth 14, I feel like they did a really good job of balancing thermals and temperatures and performance all in a package. I feel like the biggest thing that MSI did right about the Stealth 14 is that they did a really good job, I guess, dispersing the heat better than the Zephyrus G14. That's probably the biggest thing that they did, is that the overall temps in the Stealth 14 are basically always superb. They're always excellent. Whereas with the G14, you're only going to get superb temps in the G14 by power limit throttling it more, like even worse than the Stealth 14, really. And that's partially because the Ryzen chip runs really hot. And also, I'm not sure, like, besides that, like the Ryzen chip runs hot in the Zephyrus G14, and it's a vapor chamber, so they have shared cooling, and then the 4060 is just not dispersing its heat as well. So it could be a variation unit to unit, but between my Stealth 14 that I have on hand and the G14 Stealth, the Zephyrus G14 I have on hand, the Stealth 14 at the same power levels is a lower temperature. So to me, the Stealth 14 is better thermally designed, but the actual performance you're getting, Asus is basically just like pushing the performance envelope harder. And as long as both systems are stable and operational, like as long as the Zephyrus G14 doesn't fail sooner or more often than the Stealth 14, then it's not really a problem, right? So okay, so we are in. Okay, so we are 1920 by 1200. DLSS is on quality. Frame generation is enabled. Our settings are all ultra with ray tracing enabled, except for textures on low because we cannot run textures on high. Otherwise, we'll run into VRAM limitations and stuttering. So we are loading in. Perfect. Let's go ahead and just pause that for a second. Our Hogwarts is currently updating the files in the background. It says it's updating 5.2 gigs out of 62 gigs. Oh my. Oh my. Do you think the Zephyrus M16 4080 is capable enough? Yeah, I mean, it's capable enough. Sure, like you're going to be able to play all the games. You're going to be able to play, I mean, basically everything that you're wanting to do in general with the Zephyrus M16. It's just, for me, the Zephyrus M16 is not as good of a portable system as the Razer Blade 16. But I'm pretty sure the Blade 16 costs more than the Zephyrus M16. So it's like a trade-off in price between those two systems. And I would actually love to get my hands on a Zephyrus M16 for review. I need to get back on top of contacting these brands, getting them to send me units, and because I've got a lot of used laptops I need to sell right now, so I can buy more laptops. But while I am in the process of waiting, I should try to get some more actual review units in. But yeah, I think the Zephyrus M16 is a good laptop. But if I was choosing between the Zephyrus M16 and the Blade 16, I would go Blade 16. I think, pretty sure. Race Age says, hey, I have the Asus Strix G18 max specs. Should I trade it for a Legion 7i Gen 8? Totally up to you. If I was picking between the Strix G18 and the Legion 7i Pro, Legion Pro 7i. I would buy the Legion Pro 7i probably between those two, just based on like everything factored together. The Legion Pro 7i has better, well, I guess the Strix G18 has a much better display than the Legion Pro 7i, and it's a bigger display. In terms of performance, the Strix G18 might be better performance because you have a better CPU in it too. But the Legion Pro 7i has more. In some ways, it's more It's definitely more portable, and it has better ports. And you can get a 4090 in the Legion Pro 7i, where you can only get a 4080 in the Strix. So you have to go to a SCAR 18. And for the money, the Legion Pro 7i is probably a little bit better bang for the buck, I guess. But overall, it kind of depends on your situation, because like I said, the Strix G18 having the highest end CPU with the i9 13980HX, that's a pretty big advantage. You can't ignore that. But yeah. What is the difference from the Zephyrus G15 to the Zephyrus G14? Great question. So, Son of Joy, the biggest difference between the Zephyrus G15 is that it's a 16:9 aspect ratio laptop. And so that means that there are more bezels on the Zephyrus G15. And then the Zephyrus G15 is also previous gen, last gen. So you're not going to get RTX 4000 series in that. The Zephyrus G14 is a 14-inch laptop, and it's a 16:10 aspect ratio for 2023 and features the new RTX 4000 series. So if you want the RTX 4000 series in a little bigger chassis, you got to go to the Zephyrus G16, which is the 2023 version of the G15. I don't know if that makes sense. Rice Age says, yeah, I was choosing between the Asus, has a better screen, but I want a 16-inch. I was worried about the Legion's build quality this year. So if you want a 16-inch, you can always go with the Strix G16 instead of the G18. That's fine. That's a good choice too. And the because that's more the direct competitor to the Legion Pro 7i. And then the other thing I would say is just pricing. Like, I don't know what region you're in. I don't know what sales are going on at the moment. And the pricing can swing quite drastically between one week to the next for the Legion, because sometimes it goes on sales for like, nothing, like, or $100 off only, or like $50 off, and then other weeks it's like $300-$400 off, and then it's like you can almost get a 4090 version for the same price as the 4080 Strix. Masquerade says, take my offer and pay the money for half the performance, but still with the laptop, you're still everywhere and you can play games. I'm not sure, Masquerade, what you're referring to there. This is taking a long time to patch Hogwarts. We're going to just say screw Hogwarts, and we're going to get right into Control, because that should be... Oh, we got to download and install .NET Framework. What? What? Well, .NET Framework should not take too long to install, I don't think. Arian Ascari says, it's a really tough decision for me to choose between the SCAR 16, Zephyrus M16, and Legion Pro 7 in same specs. Could you tell me your opinion which one you'd go for? So if you want the very best display, go with the SCAR 16 or Zephyrus M16. Better display there with the mini LED for sure. It's massively better than the Legion Pro 7i display. Because it's mini LED, it has a higher nits brightness, it's a better contrast ratio, and it's still just as fast a response rate, but it's going to cost a little bit of a premium penny. Now, that between the SCAR 16 and Zephyrus M16 being more portable, it's thinner, it's lighter weight, it's going to be able to pack with you better. It has a better quality webcam and Windows Hello. The Legion Pro 7i, no Windows Hello as well, which is kind of a bummer. So the Zephyrus M16 being the only one with Windows Hello between those three. But those Zephyrus M16 is also going to be the lowest performance between those three laptops, especially in CPU performance. The i9 in the SCAR 16 and the Legion Pro 7 have the extra efficiency cores that's really going to boost multi-core rendering performance. And then also the Legion Pro 7, if you're actually talking about the Ryzen chip there, that's actually going to be equal to the best performance in terms of CPU performance. Of course, you got the Pro 7i, which is the Intel version of the Legion Pro 7. So just depends on which one you're actually referring to between those three. If you're not after the very best screen, like let's say you're not a graphics designer or a video editor, then I think the Legion Pro 7i still is a very viable choice. I think it feels very solid in terms of build quality when compared to the SCAR 16 and Zephyrus M16. Like in some ways it feels more solidly built, but it's also the heaviest and also the, I guess, thickest between those three. So, but it's also really, really good performance. So the SCAR 16 and the Legion Pro 7i, they're going to be very similar in performance, and the Legion Pro 7, which is the Ryzen chip, also very similar in terms of overall performance. And so it's really going to come down to pricing, and I think with the SCAR and Zephyrus series, you're really getting the premium display option, and with the Zephyrus series, you're really getting the premium portable with Windows Hello kind of package. I really like the ports more on the Legion series, though, and a bit more of the tankier build between those. The price doesn't matter since I'm physically trading the laptop for a Legion Pro Legion 7i. How was the build quality on your Legion 7i? Is the new CPU and GPU worth the trade-off for the last year's design? Okay, so specifically you want to know how is the build quality on the Legion 7i? The build quality feels very good. Like I don't think the build quality is like awful or really that much worse than my old Pro 7i, which was more metal and a glass touchpad. The plastic touchpad is probably the biggest noticeable difference between the two. I really wish the Legion lineup had Windows Hello this year, and it had 100% Adobe RGB display. Those are the two key features that I think it's missing. And a glass touchpad. Those are the other ones. Those are really noticeable features that the other premium laptops this year have. And I think the Omen 17 delivers on basically all of those things and at a very reasonable price too. So I think if you're in the market for a high performance, more premium-ish laptop, the Omen 17 is also one you should consider if you're on a budget and you're wanting a lot of the premium features like Windows Hello, Advanced Optimus, G-Sync, great port selection, good overall performance. The Omen 17 really surprised me and impressed me overall. Okay, so we are going to go to the correct resolution here. DLSS on quality essentially, and we're going to go to high preset with ray tracing on high. Okay, all of that is correct. This is taking a really long time to install the .NET on the Stealth 14 for some reason. Not sure the exact reason, but we are fully loaded in on the Zephyrus G14. We had quite the stutter there. Resetting it again. So looking at our FPS, we're very GPU bound with minimal CPU overhead. You notice that we're only pulling 22 watts of power to the Ryzen chip, 68 degrees Celsius right now, with 100% GPU utilization. And look at our GPU temperature at 75 degrees. We're doing 107 watts, and it's doing great. Okay, we are successfully installed. So this is an example of how I think Asus was hoping the Ryzen chips were going to perform temperature-wise. Like they were hoping for this level of efficiency at only 21 watts of usage, 100% GPU utilization. But the reality is almost all of the new games use more CPU wattage than that and really push a heavier dual load in almost all the new games. And that is really messing with, I think, Asus's design choices in terms of how they focus their thermal cooling. And when the Ryzen chip gets really hot, it just kind of throws everything into this really hot zone, which makes it tough for them to cool the GPU, which results in GPU thermal throttling and, yeah, not great overall thermals. And I feel like Asus's laptop is really awesome on paper, but in actual usage, it struggles a bit more. Okay, so interesting. Are we in DLSS? Yeah, we're not in DLSS. Okay, that's why. Okay. So, because we're entirely GPU bound here, the Zephyrus G14 is going to crush it. All right, so we're going to just look up in the sky a little bit at these guys for this section of the test here. We're just going to let them do their thing for a moment. And we're doing 84 FPS on the Stealth 14, 92 FPS on the Zephyrus G14. And I mean, 111 watts of power to that Zephyrus G14 RTX 4060, 90 watts of power to the Stealth 14, basically both maxing the wattage on the GPU, and both of the CPUs are barely being hit right now. Wow, our GPU temperatures are actually heating up on the Zephyrus G14, 86 degrees, almost hitting thermal throttling again on the G14. It just took a little while, I guess, for it to really build up heat. I wonder if it's going to drop the wattage down below 100 again when it starts thermal throttling. 111 versus 90 watts. Our actual boost clock is about 75 to 100 more on the Zephyrus G14. Very interesting. Let's go ahead and do some running around. Sorry, I bumped the mic there. Let me go ahead and just reposition the character here. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and just run around a minute. Here we go. Kind of run these hallways. Our 1% lows are so much better on the Zephyrus right now. Okay, so we ended up with 90 and 85 and 38.69. So we got the Zephyrus G14 with another win for today. So that is, we were, I believe, were we 8-5? Now we are 9-5 with Zephyrus G14 winning another benchmark. Very nice. Good job, Zephyrus G14. Zephyrus G14 also had the better webcam. I'm going to put that another win, 10-5 for the Zephyrus G14. We also had another key thing. Thermals were much better on the Stealth 14. So we're going to give, I think that's worth like 2 points. So we're going to give 2 points to the Stealth 14. So we were 10-5. Now we are 10-7. Overall, the Zephyrus G14 wins this benchmark battle, but not by huge margins and only by having higher temperatures does it win the benchmark battle. So in terms of which of these two laptops would I recommend if you were to buy it, let's just do a recap of everything we found out, right? So both laptops are very similarly priced. The Zephyrus G14 has a better quality screen, where the MSI has a lower resolution screen, still very good quality, very high color gamut, very high brightness, not quite as bright as the Zephyrus G14. The Zephyrus G14 has higher performance options for the GPU, in particular the RTX 4080 and 4090. Pretty big difference in terms of performance, massive gains in terms of performance. If you're looking for a higher end system for gaming, the Zephyrus G14 with a 4080 or a 4090, huge upgrade, massively portable, can play every game maxed out on ultra settings. Even the 4080 and the 4090 at QHD, it's the one I would buy if I was in a portable gaming laptop market, that you just want something that's super portable. That's the way to go, in my opinion. Now, for someone who's more on a budget, they say, I want the best portable system at like $1,500, $1,600, $1,700, right in that range. Then you're going to be choosing more between the 4060 or 4070 versions of these machines, maybe even the 4050 version of the G14. And in that scenario, I think the keyboards, the trackpads are very comparable. They both have Windows Hello. They both have very similar ports, though I think the G14 has a little bit better port selection because it has more ports, extra USB-A, but the Stealth 14 has a Thunderbolt 4. So that is a huge advantage if you want to use an external GPU enclosure, a Thunderbolt 4 GPU enclosure. You might be able to use one of those GPU enclosures with the USB 4 on the G14, but some of the GPU enclosures are not going to be compatible. I actually have to do some research and figure out what is what in that segment, because a lot of that may have changed by now. Now, in terms of portability, they're basically the exact same weight and same size, almost down to the T. In terms of design, I think the G14 design is a little bit better, a little bit classier looking, unless you get the white version of the Stealth 14. I think the Stealth 14 white version is just as classy, if not maybe a little bit classier than the G14, honestly. But the blue version, I'm just not into it as much. And in terms of speaker quality, we had a win for the bass on the G14, but the mids and highs were better on the Stealth 14. So it's like a double win, or a 1-and-1 win for each. The simple fact is, the Stealth 14 and the G14 performed great overall, and we had a lot of wins going back and forth. The only reason why this Zephyrus G14 won consistently, a little more consistently, is because of the higher wattage GPU, but it also pushed higher temperatures. So if you're someone who wants better temperatures in your gaming laptop, go with the Stealth 14 at this $1,500, $1,600, $1,700 price point. And if you want a more powerful system overall that's super portable, go with the G14 4080 or 4090 version. That's basically the summary that I would say for between these two laptops. I don't think either of them are a bad choice. They're both really good systems. It's just that you're gonna run into the thermal throttling on the Zephyrus G14, especially if you're running manual mode with max fans. If you're not running manual mode and you're just running like balanced mode, maybe not, but maybe depending on the game and everything that you're playing, because it tends to run warmer and hotter. Okay. All right. Checking chat before we end it. All right. Remember, if you're looking for a laptop, he is selling the ones that were only reviewed on his channel. So if you want to get one that is QC'd and works well, check out what he's offering. Masquerade says, if you got the money, then take Razer specs, max specs. The thing is, if you go with the Razer, there is only the Blade 15, which is going to cost a lot more money. And if you're going to go for the Blade 15, like the 4060 version is like $2,500, and at $2,500 you can get the 4080 version of the G14, which is like a no-brainer better deal with more performance. And the Blade 15 doesn't even offer a 4080 or 4090 version, and there is no currently updated Blade 14 version at all for 2023. So if you're looking for something that's a 14-inch chassis that's ultra portable, you pretty much have to go between one of these two, or maybe like the ZenBook 14 OLED is another option. Or I think there's also the Acer Triton 14. There's a handful of other 14-inch laptops to consider. But for ultra portables, I guess the Lenovo Legion Slim series is another option to consider. Or maybe, I guess, the Zephyrus G16 could be an option, or the Zephyrus M16 if you're looking for something a little bit bigger but still portable. But the ultra portable, I think the G14 4080, 4090 version is probably the best choice for overall system quality. A mini LED display, 4090, 32 gigs of RAM, QHD, 240 hertz display with 600 nits brightness, 100% Adobe RGB, good ports for a 14-inch chassis. There's not many things you can criticize about it, except maybe you would want a little better thermal solution, which you could get a laptop cooling pad when you're at home to really help reduce those temperatures a bit more. So that is my summary comparison between the Stealth 14 and the Zephyrus G14. I feel like in the ultra portable category, I'd go G14 4090 if I have the money. If you don't have the money, if I didn't have the money and I was choosing between these two, I think I would buy the Stealth 14 personally, if I had the budget being capped, because of the lower native resolution being a better fit for the VRAM. So if you have the money, go for the 4080, 4090 version of the G14. If you don't have the money and you're capped at this price point and you want something ultra portable, then yeah, I would go probably Stealth 14 for the full HD display and better thermals. And just knowing that you can pretty much run everything without having to fiddle with settings at max settings because of the lower resolution. All right, so there you go. That's my take. Stealth 14 versus G14. I hope you guys found that helpful. I see you guys chatting here. Rifki says, somehow Razer is cheaper than the Strix Scar in my country. I got a Razer a week ago. Interesting. I wonder if it's the same specs. LSP says, I ultimately chose the Legion Pro 7i. Price performance ratio is just too good. Scar 16 is affected. It doesn't get affected by end of the year sale. Interesting. I think that's what you mean. Yeah. Anyway, thanks so much, guys, for tuning in. I'll see you in the next one.